is awarded the Order of the British Empire. The OBE. Yeah.
OBE. Yeah.
The grey. See, the grey part. We are talking about the Templars. The man in charge of the British Treasury, even today, appointed by Parliament, is still called the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Now, the Chequer is the chessboard inside. It's the courtyard inside the Temple Bar. Walk into it. It's actually a floor, which is a chessboard, and that's where the Templars who were into loans, giving out loans and getting back interest. They used to put out. That's how they worked out their profit and loss. Was on that floorboard. So even today, the guy in charge is still called the Chancellor of the Exchequer from the days of the Knights Templar. Hasn't changed.
There we go. Yeah, interesting.
The grey one is, in Masonry, high Masonry, the grey man is the man who walks between the two realities, the one the public sees and the one the public doesn't see, between the black and the white squares.
You know,
is a shade of grey. And so grey men are those who are given higher orders, which few on the other sides will ever know.
You know, I'm very glad that you mentioned this, and I'm going to stretch things a bit here, but nonetheless, I'm going to give it out and see what your take on it, because it's very interesting that you mentioned the grey, because one of the members that I came across here, and this will lead kind of into two different avenues here, but one of the names I came across as a member of the Inner Temple was Bram Stoker, who of course made the myth of Dracula known, or he wrote that story basically. And the question, I guess, here, or the comment here, is that I've heard that some of these guys maybe have handling the gene technology back, several hundred years, which actually could lead to a person or different persons actually being able to extend their own lives, meaning that some of these guys actually at the top might be several hundred years old. I don't know. This is just an idea I threw out there, and I've heard it through other channels. Now, I don't know if you mentioned it or not, but and one interesting thing here that I just wanted to connect with the Greys and the name of the Greys is, of course, that we have this popular idea of the image of what is known as the Grey alien, and the entire story here seems to kind of mud together, and it's a weird kind of mythological aspect on all of this, of course. But what's your take on all of this about the genes and stuff like that?
What we do know, what we can trace, is documented. Is the Rosicrucian Manifesto that came out in the time of Queen Elizabeth I's court. It was the first openly Rosicrucian Masonic court that had come out in the West. And all her advisors were Rosicrucians. And the only thing they allowed the public to know was that they would give those who served the great work, as they called it. Now, the great work goes back to Plato, and before even to Pythagoras. The great work, anyone who served it would be given life extension. We do know that. And sure enough, the main members you'll find in history, Benjamin Franklin and others, were given not just life extension, they were very potent right into their 80s when it came to the ladies and so on.
Yeah.
They had no problems in these areas. Today we watch the higher guys like Kissinger, Maurice Strong, both in their late 70s or 80s, globe-trotting, putting in 14, 16 hours a day with tremendous energy.
Yeah.
And many, many more. Michael Sharp, who was a sort of... He was a guy in Canada who picked politicians. They used to go and see him before they were okayed, passed to get up the ladder. He died at his desk, working 14 hours a day in his 90s in Canada. No previous old age problems. None of them have old age problems. They simply die in their sleep, like the Queen Mother at 100 years of age. As far as gene technology goes, we know that Francis Bacon wrote about that in the novel, The New Atlantis, where he described America. That's what it was about, a country to be born in the West. there would have a form of Republican democracy on the surface, but in reality it would be run by a secret group of scientists. And he talked about being shown in the novel, in the last chapter, the visitors allowed to see the laboratories underground, where they could create different life species by taking the most minute pieces of life and combining them together. Now, they weren't talking about grafting. And they said that we could actually create any kind of animal and know what the end product would be by mixing the different smallest particles of life before it was completed. So, in other words, it wasn't a new thing. Now, this was written in the days of candlelight to write with, the horse and buggy and sails on ships. And here he is. He also talked about a machine to control the weather.
Yeah. Oh, really?
So that was written in the late 1500s and published in 1602.
Interesting.
So I'm sure, and the whole thing is, of course, the Rosicrucians at the top, like the Royal Society of England, which still exists today, was entirely composed of Rosicrucians and eventually Freemasons. Still is today. They led all of the research into astronomy and genetic research and so on. They dish out the grants from the big foundations to the scientists to explore certain areas. As far as Gray goes, we know that the novel based on Dorian Gray, the legend of Dorian Gray, was along the same lines of a man who could live for as long as his portrait didn't change. He'd always stay young. So you know, a lot of little clues along there, but no proof as such that they could live hundreds of years. At least not that group.
Exactly. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. And my my connections there are a bit obscured. I know that at least jumping from the Dracula mythology to the gray alien, but my consensus or my idea of that is of course that. Just explaining that there might be, if this is the case, that there are people who might be living at least, longer than the average human being. That we have several things connecting there. Okay, we have the the myth of the Greys returning then as going back to the regional the Grey. Like a kind of an incarnation, or that these people themselves, the Greys from the beginning, were, are living on in this new aspect, or the reincarnation, or whatever, through this.
Yeah, they do like to put this stuff out. Whether it's true or not, we just don't know.
No, of course.
We do know they have their own religion at the top. They certainly promote it to us, that is, to do with reincarnation. We know the ancient Romans, the wealthy families believed that they came back in the same lineage as their family. So they technically had the lares or the fires going down below in the cellar where they could watch the spirits of their ancestors, and when they died they could become their great-grandson in the future type of thing. The pharaohs also had that same mythology. That the pharaoh, especially when the pharaoh was dying, or just died, they would bring in the son and lay him next to the sarcophagus, and they would perform the opening of the mouth ceremony. The idea being that the father could literally transmigrate as opposed to simple reincarnation. The spirit could leave the father and go into the son. So the son could have more than one spirit within him. And that was one of the myths or rumors they put out as to why they were so clever. They incorporate the wisdom of their fathers and their fathers before them.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, absolutely. Who knows, if it's true or not? But there it is.
No, though, when you're talking about genetic research, one of the biggest and best mathematicians that Britain had in the late 1800s, early 1900s, was Rutherford. And Rutherford, in his own memoirs, wrote about being employed in his last years as a mathematician working for scientific research in England on genetic research. Now, that was back in the 1920s. And yet, supposedly, they hadn't discovered the gene till much later. So that's in his own biography. Which meant, why would you need a mathematician if you could not see them and couldn't count them, for instance? It tells you that they did know this stuff back then. Yeah.
Huh. Do you know anything about a guy called Henry Wellcome? This is about something known as the Wellcome Trust, and this was allegedly one of the funds for the Human Genome Project, or one of the leading foundations that helped to develop and map the human genome. I know, but I don't know if you know.
I know that the Wellcome is probably related to the Wellcome pharmaceutical company.
Probably. Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah.
I know that the Human Genome Project. The Human Genome Project is typically Masonically worded.
Yeah.
Because genome, if you speak it, is gnome, which is a gnome.
That's right.
A little person.
That's right.
They've been mapping the genes of the common people.
Yeah.
But they're admitting they've been doing it since about the 1950s, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
So they want to know all the different gene types of the common people.
Definitely. Yeah, and being able to map up the human organism in that way, and being able to, again, this is ideas that are being implemented, that you can beforehand look if people are going to have traits of being, a criminal or alcoholic or whatever, and they can either remove that or the entire person before they even come into this world. So
that's the whole purpose. These guys at the top are eugenicists. Part of their religion is based on eugenics. And the superiority of different types or castes of people.
Yeah.
They've always been into this, and they've never changed. There's no reason why they should change. But they do want to map the common people for a future, more efficient society to serve them better.
Yeah, indeed. I want to return a little bit to again the Bilderberg meeting there. Do you know if any of the things, or if many of the things that are discussed during these meetings are something that we can see, traces of now being implemented? We can go back, 1 year or several years or whatever. Because I'm saying this because I know that during the allegedly at least, during the last meeting in Ottawa, 2006, the depopulation agenda was apparently brought up, and or at least the idea of overpopulation were discussed and kind of addressed as, okay, this is a problem, we need to have a solution to this in some way, and I can certainly see that the idea of overpopulation is being introduced more and more by the day, basically. But do you know if anything more, or other beyond that, or maybe verify what I just said there, that are being discussed on these meetings?
Yes, as I say, they've had a mandate since they've begun. It's always been the same mandate with the same goals. They have never varied their goals. They knew the world they wanted to bring into existence a long, long time ago. And the world, apart from being more efficient, with also using science to guide the people and to also alter the people through different phases physically, biologically. The other phase was to depopulate the people. Now, they've been doing it since the 50s.
That's right.
Through inoculations. There's no doubt on that whatsoever.
Yeah.
We have no doubt. The statistics show it. Since the 50s, especially with polio vaccines and all the rest of it, you'll see people now with basically elderly diseases coming down with them, and they're even in adolescence now. Crippling arthritis and juvenile arthritis and things like this.
Could there
we
be...
also know that the sperm count in the male has dropped 75% since the 1950s. 3/4 sterile already.
Yeah.
The fastest growing business in America is fertility clinic.
Oh, really?
And so it's male and female.
Yeah.
Biologically, we're seeing biophysical effects in the males, young males and females. They're different than they were 50 years ago at the same age.
So
the hips are disappearing in the female.
Yeah.
The guys are becoming very narrow frame, thin, and the guys are becoming more effeminate. It's because biological changes have taken place because the brain itself and the various glands